No in-person teaching at 10 schools tomorrow due to facility damage caused by rainstorms. In Thailand, some Red Hill Peninsula residents evacuated after a landslide. And one lane of Shackle Road reopens to single-deck buses and private cars. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. After the historic rainstorm, the city was once again pounded by downpours, with the amber rainstorm warning signal issued this morning. The government said most services in the city had returned, but at least 10 schools have to suspend in-person teaching on Monday after facilities were damaged during Friday's rainstorm. Mimo Sangai with more details.
The black rainstorm on Friday hit Hong Kong severely, leaving extensive damage in different places, including schools and their surroundings. This is a slope outside Salesian School in Keqiang, a path that students must walk past every day. The floor tiles were washed away, exposing underground pipelines. Tree branches and other objects piled up at the school gate. Under such a situation, the school decided to postpone in-person teaching until Friday, meaning students will have online classes between Monday and Thursday. The American International School in Kowloon Town also decided to suspend all classes tomorrow, saying the rainstorm had caused power outage on the campus. Speaking to the press today, the government said they had received reports about damage from 117 schools. While most schools can conduct normal lessons on Monday after repair work, the government said 10 schools have to make alternative arrangements.
With campuses being affected or damaged by the runoffs and debris or floods, and that follow-up work and clearance is needed. Therefore, face-to-face classes cannot be resumed tomorrow. For these schools, they have made alternative arrangements, such as online classes. They've also notified relevant parents and students.
Cross-boundary students, meanwhile, will have to travel via Huanggang Port to the city as the Liantown Hanyu Way and Man Kam Toll checkpoints are still closed. Mimo Sangai, TVB News.
As rainstorms continue to batter Hong Kong, landslides pose threats to multiple locations in the city. Among the latest to be affected is Red Hill Peninsula, a high-end residential estate in Thailand where some residents had to be evacuated. After an initial inspection, the government also confirmed one of the houses has illegally occupied government lands and there are unauthorized structures. This luxury private residential estate, Red Hill Peninsula, is where the landslide happened. On the slope, vegetation gave way to bare rock, soil, and gravel. The swimming pool has its bottom structure exposed with only part of this lawn and chairs left perching on the hill. Right next door, a suspected basement structure jutted out precariously. Staff of the building's department, lands department, and geotechnical engineering office inspected one of the 3 affected houses Sunday morning. In an early morning statement, authorities said houses numbers 70, 72, and 74 at Red Hill Peninsula have been affected by the landslide. House number 72 saw imminent structural danger. Tenants ordered to be evacuated immediately. The 2 neighboring houses bear no immediate risks for now, but further inspection and assessment are needed due to the partially exposed retaining wall. Saturday night, some residents there were said to have denied building's department's inspection and required police intervention. Sources said the tenant of the unit in question is now overseas, and the driver has to seek the homeowner's permission before letting officers in. Today, the government also confirmed house number 72 at Red Hill Peninsula saw illegal building structures, and prosecution would be made if any law was broken.
Our initial evidence shows that there is indeed some breach of the leases and also unlawful occupation. But our primary focus at the present moment is to stabilize the slope to ensure public safety. And once that is done, we will proceed with the necessary enforcement against the relevant breaches.
Construction work underway too at the neighboring house number 70. Structural engineer Ngai Hock Yan suspects the ongoing construction work and suspected illegal building structures coupled with a torrential downpour might have led to the landslide at Red Hill Peninsula. He said that's especially likely if there are basement excavation works involved. Raymond Chen, the former head of the Civil Engineering and Development Department, said at the top of the agenda now is the fortification of the slope with campuses or sprayed concrete with diversion of water away from the area. That's to prevent the next bout of rainstorms from triggering another landslide in the area. One lane of Shackle Road resumed service on Saturday evening after a landslide caused by Friday's rainstorm blocked traffic. Memo Sangai reports.
After emergency repairs, one lane of the Shackle Road was reopened at around 9 p.m. on Saturday. This means some sections of the road must accommodate two-way traffic in a single lane. The repaired lane was first tested by some government vehicles before private cars were allowed to pass through it after midnight. At around 6 a.m. this morning, Citybus resumed its single-deck Route No. 9 bus services between Keqiang and Shackle. However, driving on the one-lane two-way road means bus drivers must be more cautious than ever. This bus driver said the maximum speed limit at Shackle Road is 50 kilometers an hour under normal conditions. I now have to be more careful and check if there are any pebbles on the lane, he said. Gavin To, chairman of the Hong Kong Institution of Engineers Geotechnical Division, said authorities used construction materials such as gunite and boulders to repair the road subsidence on Shackle Road. He said such methods are used in emergency situations to avoid more landslides. Meanwhile, residents from the nearby Big Wave Bay village were busy tidying up their homes, picking up large piles of rubbish that were delivered by the flood. After the village suffered serious flooding on Friday, some residents hope authorities can improve the drainage system in that area. Memo Sangai, TVB News.
G20 leaders today paid their respects to Indian independence leader Mahatma Gandhi as their summit came to a close. All leaders hailed the summit as a success after 3 key declarations over 2 days of meeting. The African Union joining the bloc, language on the Russia-Ukraine war that satisfied even Moscow, and plans to build a rail and shipping corridor linking India with the Middle East and Europe. Nasvi Karim with more.
After a tense lead-up to the Group of 20 or G20 summit in India, a sense of peace and satisfaction prevailed over global leaders as they visited the Gandhi Memorial in New Delhi today. Initial fears that the summit would only increase divisions over key issues, particularly the Russia-Ukraine war, eased on Saturday when host India announced that all declarations had been agreed upon. Even Moscow, represented by Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, was satisfied with the final wording that did not condemn Russia, but highlighted the war's human suffering and urging against any use of nuclear weapons and force to grab territory. Hailing a successful summit, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi also presided over 2 other major announcements: the African Union joining the bloc, and a massive multinational rail and ports project, the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, or IMEC, that would connect the Middle East with India and Europe and enhance trade and commerce.
This is a big deal. This is a real big deal. One Earth, one family, one future. That's the focus of this G20 summit. As a key part of this corridor, we're going to invest in ships and rail that extends from India all the way to Europe, connected by the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel.
Washington hopes Israel's inclusion in the multi-billion-dollar project will help in the eventual normalization of ties between the Jewish state and Saudi Arabia. The US-led plan is seen as a countermeasure to China's Belt and Road Initiative. However, the force behind Beijing's infrastructure project, President Xi Jinping, did not attend the summit, instead sending Premier Li Qiang. Biden was asked about Xi's absence.
President Biden, has President Xi's absence impacted the summit?
It would be nice to have him here, but not always.
The summit may have gone well for those in New Delhi, but not for Ukraine, a key absentee which was not invited by India. A spokesman for Ukraine's foreign ministry said the summit had nothing to be proud of. Nasvi Karim, TVB News.
Chinese Premier Li Qiang has urged G20 members to be resolute in advancing economic globalization and promote unity, cooperation, and inclusion within the group. Li, representing China instead of President Xi Jinping, urged all countries to respect one another, seek common ground, adding that no one can remain immune in the face of major crises. He said this is in line with Xi's proposal for a Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiative, and Global Civilization Initiative, mentioned in the first session of the summit. The G20 members should stick to the original aspiration of unity and cooperation, he said in a session attended by U.S. President Joe Biden and other leaders. Li stressed that China will steadfastly deepen reforms, expand the country's opening up, promote high-quality development, and advance the Chinese modernization. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said during the G20 summit that Britain would commit $2 billion to the Green Climate Fund, while in New Delhi, Sunak and his wife visited a Hindu temple. Sunak and his wife offered prayers at the temple ahead of a visit to Mahatma Gandhi Memorial. The previous day, Sunak pledged Britain's biggest funding commitment ever to the global climate change fight. The United Nations Green Climate Fund is aimed at channeling money to poorer nations to help them meet targets to reduce carbon emissions and develop cleaner energy. Britain has committed to spend £11.6 billion on international climate finance between 2021 and 2026. U.S. President Joe Biden arrived in Hanoi this afternoon as Washington seeks to woo an important partner in Southeast Asia. Washington and Hanoi normalized relations in 1995, 22 years after the end of U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. They have been comprehensive partners since 2013. During Biden's two-day visit, their relationship is expected to elevate to comprehensive strategic partners. That's Vietnam's highest level of diplomatic ties, putting the U.S. at the same level as China, Russia, India, and South Korea. Biden is scheduled to meet Vietnam's Communist Party General Secretary Nguyen Phu Trong. But Biden's visit comes as bilateral trade and investment ties are growing and a long-simmering territorial dispute between Vietnam and China heats up in the South China Sea. Still ahead, the death toll from the massive earthquake in Morocco exceeds 2,000. Two arrested in the UK on suspicion of espionage, including a researcher in the parliament. Welcome back. The death toll from Friday night's massive earthquake in Morocco has surpassed 2,000. Although the epicenter was in a remote area of the mountains, the size of the shock means there has been widespread devastation. David Garrett reports.
The centre was in the Atlas Mountains, roughly 70 kilometres south of Marrakesh. It's sparsely populated, but the destructive force of the quake is severe here. The area is hard to reach, but rescue teams arrived and quickly started digging through rubble, searching for survivors.
It really sinks home when you come here and see the epicenter of all these poor people who've lost their accommodation, they have no water. This obviously is a natural disaster, but I think everybody in the European community and around the world must help.
King Mohammed VI ordered the armed forces to mobilise. The Moroccan government has now taken the formal step of asking for outside help. Spain will send a rescue team and more help is coming.
We stand ready to assist in whatever way we can once we're requested to do that. But part of what's going to need to happen is we'll need to know how many people there are who have been affected, how big the needs are.
Most of the dead are from densely populated Marrakesh and 5 surrounding provinces. The ancient buildings add to the character of this city, but they were never designed to withstand a shock like this. The Old Town is a World Heritage Site and popular tourist destination. Buildings that have stood since the 11th century are gone. Piles of rubble were seen outside the famous Cartouche Mosque, which suffered damage.
It happens just down this road too, and when you go like further and further, there is a lot of damage that happened to a lot of buildings. Some of them are mosques, some of them are houses. A lot of communities got hurt.
More tremors have been felt in Marrakesh, and there are fears of more shocks, and already damaged houses could cave in. On Saturday night, a day on from the devastation, many chose to sleep out on the street in the open air for safety. David Garrett, TVB News.
In Japan, at least 3 people have died in incidents related to record rainfall in the northeastern region. Moist air from Tropical Storm Yun-Yang and the edge of a high-pressure system in the Pacific generated rain clouds over the Kanto and Tohoku regions. Residents in Fukushima, Chiba, and Ibaraki prefectures were urged to remain on high alert. In several areas, record rainfall was recorded, with volumes in 24 hours matching those of the entire month of September last year. Reports say landslides happened at more than 200 locations and over 1,500 homes were inundated. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said he had raised his concern over any Chinese interference in Britain's parliamentary democracy during a meeting with Premier Keqiang. The meeting took place on the sidelines of the G20 summit in India. This after 2 men in the UK were arrested in alleged espionage cases. One of them, a researcher in the British Parliament, was apprehended on suspicion of spying for China. British media said the researcher in his 20s is thought to be linked to several Tory MPs with classified information, including Security Minister Tom Tugendhat and Foreign Affairs Committee Chair Alicia Kearns. The man worked with MPs on international policy and had access to Tugendhat before the latter became Security Minister in September last year. The suspect was said to have lived in China before. Reports say the second suspect is in his 30s, but little details were given about his background. Both men were reportedly arrested in March under the Official Secrets Act. They were later released on police bail until early October. Back locally, a worker was suspected to have been electrocuted when installing an electronic board at the science park in Sha Tin. The man collapsed and was later pronounced dead. Police received a report at around 11 a.m. saying a male technician fainted when installing a panel in an engine room. Paramedics later sent him to hospital where he died. The Labor Department said it has sent personnel to the site to investigate the cause of death. The city has seen a string of sexual harassment and sexual assault allegations lately at university orientation camps. Speaking to TVB News on the Record program, Equal Opportunities Commission Chairman Ricky Chu admits the need for more protection by tightening some clauses in the sex discrimination ordinance. Chu said the ordinance may not be able to cover the prosecution of sexual harassment cases when these orientation camps are jointly organized by more than one institution. 2 years ago, proposals were submitted to amend the relevant clauses and plug the loopholes. Chu said the government has been actively considering the plans. And that's the news. Thank you for watching.